Hello everyone, welcome to Power Beans. In this video, I'll be sharing with you my thoughts on Dark Souls 2 so far. Before I say anything though, I would like to remind you that my opinion is by no means the truth above all else. I consider myself a casual gamer. I play games just to have fun and share my experience with others. It's perfectly okay to have a different opinion. If you all had the same, life will be quite boring. Also, some of the footage has some minor spoilers, so if you feel like avoiding them, you can just listen to the audio. With that out of the way, let's begin. Being one of the many gamers that saw the controversial E3 footage, I had really big hopes in experiencing the feel of going through dark corridors with torch in hand, as well as figuring out challenging puzzles. It was a shame that From Software didn't deliver in those aspects. Regardless of that, Dark Souls 2 packs a great deal of immersion from the very first moments in the game. The majority of the environments are varied while not feeling out of place. Some views are beautiful, while others you'd wish they worked a little bit more on them. I have to admit that sometimes the ability to teleport early in the game broke the immersion for me, making me feel like I was just going from one room to another. As a consequence, I missed walking through the different connected areas that the previous game had, which I believe it fit the game perfectly. The lore in this game is definitely more accessible than its previous counterparts, which can be a good thing for people who don't enjoy exploring thoroughly, but veterans of the series will surely see this as a step backwards, since they were already used to the pace the developers set and enjoyed picking every single bit of information about the world. On the other hand, one thing that I dislike from this new direction is that sometimes I felt like the game was trying too hard and making you care about its story, while the previous Dark Souls had set an amazing pace that lured the player into it without him noticing. I'm not really an expert here, but it certainly feels slower than the previous Dark Souls. The movements have more weight put into them, making you think twice before you move in for the kill. The backstab has been reworked, requiring you to land a hit before being able to perform it, and the controls feel the majority of the time responsive. On the PC version, the durability problem has been a bit obnoxious at times, but nothing to worry about after a couple of hours sank into the game. There's a great variety in enemies. Their moveset patterns range from generic and predictable to entertaining and unexpected. I haven't yet got around the artistic design of some enemies. While playing the game, I kept having a constant feeling of déjà vu. The fan service and references to the previous game were sometimes welcomed, but in other situations they felt like an excuse to recycle assets. Maybe it has to do with the fact that since the game is the second installment in the series, they couldn't stray too far from the original. Regarding the bosses, I was 100% sure when nearing the end of the game that they couldn't hold a candle when compared with the ones of the previous Dark Souls. But when I took a closer look, it stopped being as obvious as I thought. It may sound a bit weird, but allow me to explain. I think that many forgettable bosses in Dark Souls 2 have had a negative influence over the cool ones that should be definitely memorable. Enemies such as the Prowling Magus or the Covetous Demon should just have been mini-bosses without life bars. Right now, Dark Souls 2 is the game with the most bosses in the entire franchise, including the DLC or not. This oversaturation of bosses is what may have led us to less appreciate interesting enemies such as the Smelter Demon, the Executioner's Chariot, or the Ruined Sentinels. Another important subject to discuss is how easily boss battles can be won if you have Phantom summoned. When I had more than one attempt against the boss, I would just summon one or two phantoms and I could just sit back and relax. Few bosses maintained a challenging difficulty, but the rest were definitely a breeze with friends. I think that scaling would have helped in this situation, but I'm not too sure if it would have been a good solution in the long run. Maybe they didn't want to create bullet sponge bosses and make the fights tedious as a consequence. On a side note, I like the fact that you can earn the sets from the different NPCs by keeping them alive during boss fights. I've never wanted to kill them for their equipment in the previous game. Well, except a few that weren't particularly friendly. Levels are a bit lacking in terms of exploration and substance, but I have to admit that the game successfully creates the illusion of a vast world. I can't help but think that it was a design choice from the developers to help draw new players into the franchise. Each time I reached a new place, I would feel overwhelmed and hesitate on where to start exploring, only to find out that there were few passages off the beaten path. Despite the levels being simpler, that doesn't mean the difficulty is gone. You will find traps everywhere and enemies zealously waiting to ambush you. Sometimes while playing, I would desperately hope the bonfire to be in the next area, but the majority of them are so close to each other that I didn't get to fill up my anxiety level. In many situations I was like, what? Already? Which didn't really help me feel relieved and satisfied with my progress. I do like the fact that some of them are hidden from plain sight though. At the beginning of the game, I was too scared to openly fight against other players, but I have to confess that the few times in which the game forced players into my world or I was summoned to theirs were wonderful. Each encounter was worthy of being mentioned in a water cooler conversation. Now, this is not big news to seasoned players, but the fact that the same experience was kept intact in this game means a lot to me. Seriously, it never gets old. On the other hand, I would have wished the developers to take the online experience away from the tried and true formula, like having the players create their own covenants and add their custom perks as well as progression rewards. Maybe we'll see that in a future installment. Overall, I think it's a solid buy. It's not as great as we were led to believe, but it's a very good game nonetheless. Despite Dark Souls 2 not truly expanding on the foundation set by its predecessors, I really enjoyed it. It's a fine new entry into an already established franchise, so if you have already played the first Dark Souls and you're still craving for some of that challenge and difficulty, you should definitely check it out. It also serves as an introduction for gamers that haven't tried this formula yet, as I found the game a little bit more forgiving than the first one. But not too much, I assure you. So those were my thoughts about the game. If you found the video interesting and want to see more in the future, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe. See you next time on Power Beans.